Yes, people. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to KGX to the ZTV. Help a brother out. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, turn those notifications on, share if you're so inclined to do so. But yes, let's get into it. The main topic of today, transfer window has closed yesterday. I needed some time to digest it all, take into account some of the last minute moves because there were some deals that fell through after the fact. There were some paperwork issues apparently and things like that. Tyreek George, um, Samuel Smith, and so forth, that had an impact on the window. I wouldn't say too much negatively, those last few moves on the window, negatively for the players, and you feel for the players, but overall from the club, not so much. But yeah, let's get into it. So before we start the transfer window, right? This year was a little bit different because there were technically two windows in the summer, one that opened up during the Club World Cup and then one that opened up after the Club World Cup. So Chelsea came into the season, in my mind, we needed at minimum 4 positions or areas strengthened. We needed a striker, we needed a left winger, we needed maybe 5. All right, striker, we needed a left wing solution, we needed a center back in my mind, we needed a upgrade at goalkeeper, and we needed backup for Cucurella at left back. So we started out the window very positively. Vibes were incredibly high when it comes to the Club World Cup. How we ended the season with even before the Club World Cup, how we ended with the Conference League, top 5 or top 4, winning with I'll say a slightly depleted squad at a tough Forest team. We know Forest was sliding down the table a little bit, but that's still a very good team. So expectations were high. Expectations got raised, rightly so, right? Things happen. Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, famous Mike Tyson saying. And we started out, and our expectations and our incomings started out on a very positive note, right? There was João Pedro came in and made an instant impact and has been so far probably across the league the signing of the season so far. Delap before that, right? Delap was a $30 million release clause buy. Despite him getting injured and being out for upwards of 6 to 8 weeks, still, in my opinion, a very good signing, a very good young, promising player. I've liked what I've seen from Delap. We didn't get to see too much of him in the most recent game because of the injury, but we'll talk about how that injury affected some of our plans and things like that. We needed a left winger, and very early on, we were linked with 2 left wingers. We'll talk about the quality of those 2 left wingers and whether or not they're adequate enough to be playing for Chelsea in a side that wants to be in and around the title conversation, pick up some cups here and there. Gittins and Garnacho were looking always like the 2 left wingers that we were going to bring in because we lost Sancho back to loan, didn't want to agree to the lower wages. Mudryk suspended. Tyreek George, not really a true out-and-out left touchline winger and so forth. So, that sort of ties back to the need that we had at that position. We needed, in my opinion, a left back cover for Cucurella. We pretty aggressively and obtained Hato from Ajax I'll say fairly early in the second window. So happy on that front. In my opinion, we needed, even before the Levi Colwell injury, we needed an upgrade on the right-sided center back, right? Going into the season, our right-sided center back options were a frequently injured Fofana, I'll say ideally 2 backup options in Tosin and Trev. And then even on the left-hand side, Colwell, Badiashile, Ancelino, Malang Sarr, even, you can throw in young Josh on that right-handed side too. In my opinion, we needed to upgrade the right-sided center back before the injury. But due to the injury, my focus shifted more so to a left-sided center back because one, Badiashile is out injured, and two, even when he's healthy, I don't rate him, and I do not think that he's of the quality to be playing week in, week out for Chelsea Football Club. I don't think he can push Levi Colwill. I don't think he provides good squad depth. Yes, he's more comfortable on the ball and possession than some of our other players, but in my opinion, he lacks concentration. He lacks the physical attributes despite being tall. He's not a great athlete, in my opinion. And if you're not a great athlete, having concentration issues means that you need to rely on your pace and your physical prowess to sort of get back into position, to cover up for mistakes. And I don't believe that he has that in his locker. And then for me, the last one obviously was an upgrade on Robert Sanchez, which maybe it was smokescreen looking back on it, but at the time we were linked to Mike Maignan from AC Milan, French #1. Donnarumma, although that looked pretty much out of it, and Donnarumma has since gone and signed with Man City, so that'll be a very interesting fit, because for a side that loves to play out of the back and won a lot of league titles with Ederson playing out of the back, their dynamic is completely going to change. But you could point to last year, PSG getting over the line finally in the Champions League, winning their treble with Donnarumma at the back, saved them countless times in the Champions League, Anfield away, Aston Villa away. Even in the final, he didn't have to do too much work, but he was an instrumental part. 26 years old, Italy #1, won the Euros. His pedigree is there. Almost 10 years in the game already at 26, which is madness. But in my mind, those were the areas that we needed to fill. And if you're looking at it from a standpoint of, folks like to give grades and things like that, from an aspect of, did we fill a need, a position of need? You can say we got in 2 strikers. So we filled that particular position of need. We got in 2 left wingers. So we technically addressed that position. We addressed the left back position. And then we neglected to sign a center back. Maresca was told to find internal solutions, which is kind of crazy to me to suggest to your manager to find internal solutions when your manager is working with these players day in and day out. But that's another topic. And then obviously the goalkeeper position, it is what it is. We've been calling for Robert Sanchez to be replaced since his first year here. Most of us didn't want him in the first place. But, he's on a semi-decent run of form. You can see what the board sort of thinks about and how they highly rate Penders, and they don't want to block his pathway. I'm of the opinion that no matter how good Penders is, I don't want to rely on a 20-year-old keeper. Obviously, the comparisons next year for Penders, obviously the comparisons to Thibaut Courtois and things like that are inevitable because of his nationality. He's Belgian, because of his size, because he's left-footed by nature and things like that. But again, when Thibaut Courtois came back to Chelsea, he had already won a La Liga. He had won a Europa League. He had won he had played in Champions League final. He had won a Copa del Rey. He was already thrown into the fire at a much higher level than Penders is at Strasbourg. So my hesitation and my indifference towards it is not so much towards Penders as a player, but more so of the fact that he's young, and I do not want to be relying on a 20-year-old keeper, or if he's 21 at the time when he comes back, whatever his age may be, to get us over the line, because next year we need to be in that title conversation, regardless of what Arsenal do in the window next year, regardless of what City do, regardless of what Liverpool do. The project needs to turn the corner, and we need to start competing again for the majors, even though I do believe that we can compete for the Champions League this year. I believe that we can give the Premier League a decent run, take it further than we took it last year in terms of being in the top 2, top 3. But, my overall opinion at this window, and as we sort of break it down, is we addressed some of the needs. There's question marks over how we address those needs and whether or not those signings are going to play out. And I'm of the opinion that you can't really fully grade a transfer window until 6-12 months down the line, because you need to see these players, you need to see how they play in the system, you need to see how the manager uses them, you need to see, for some cases like Gittins and Hato, how they adjust to a different league, a different country, and things like that. So there's a betting in period for all transfers. And despite the YouTube frenzy or the YouTube trend and Twitter trend of just jumping on someone as soon as they get there and writing them off and saying that they're trash, which of course I'm guilty of too, right? Sometimes it's just a banter thing, and there's no real substance or style between it. It's just you just want to get some jokes across. And look, I'm a big proponent of comedy and things like that. So look, I get it, but at the same time, if you're being realistic, you need to give folks time. Gittins needs time. Hato needs time. Even Garnacho underneath us needs time and things like that. More experienced players, like Pedro, has proven that he's hit the ground running and things like that. So you're a little bit less inclined to give a player like that time, because he's also been in the Premier League for 3, 4, 5 years, dating back to his Watford days, even before he even got to Brighton. So with that being said, let's take a look real quick. We'll look at the figures and things like that. And as I mentioned before, we won't get too much into the price, because as fans, what can we say? You can say that we overpaid for certain players like Garnacho and things like that, but you can also say that that the jury's still out. These folks could prove, just like Cole Palmer. We got Cole Palmer for 40 million. In hindsight, he's a 100 million, 125 million pound player. So, it's a little bit difficult, like I said, until you get to see them, until they play some more minutes under their belt, to really judge that price tag. But one thing that you can judge is you can judge the need, you can judge the priority, you can judge that particular player's profile and how you see them fitting into the squad, and whether or not you think that they can improve the squad. We also did bring in, some more players that we'll talk to when we go down this list, the likes of Esteval, who was purchased before. So if you want to count him as this window's signee, because this is when he came to us, I'm perfectly fine with that. If you don't want to count him because he was technically on the books for a different year, you can also do that. I'm also fine with it. The players here, he's got to contribute now to the squad, because he's a senior member of this, or I would say senior member, but he's in the senior squad. So we'll judge him off that, right? So that's Esteval, that's Asugo, who was agreed in like Marchish time. That's Santos, who's coming back to us, and so forth. But like I said, we'll get into this list, and we'll talk about each of them, whether or not we see them contributing, and whether or not there's early signs that we should be concerned, or if there's early signs that we should be extremely pleased with their early return, so to say. So obviously, João Pedro, I talked about it before. I mean, he's been a breath of fresh air. He came to us with concerns about his output, right? 5 or 6 non-penalty goals in the league last year. Never really been a prolific scorer, but overall package, his overall game, very tidy, strong, fights, got a little bit of nastiness to him. Just a technical all-around player, and he's been everything that he was advertised at and much more, because the goal scoring has been a lovely plus. And because of the Delap injury, we are going to have to rely on him very, very much this year. We're going to have to take care of him in terms of rotation. We're going to have to be very mindful, because if he picks up a knock, we are down to what should have been our third string striker, or third striker in the pecking order, in Guéhi, who was also Sunderland's third striker in the pecking order. So there's some nervousness when it comes to Pedro for me, but it's not from his ability on the pitch. It's simply from the aspect of, if he picks up a knock, you hear me knock on wood, we can be extremely light up front, and we're going to have to find internal creative solutions, or Maresca is, to address that particular issue. Jamie Gittins, I'll be honest with you. Do I think that we overpaid for him? Probably, considering what other wingers went for, who were probably a little bit more accomplished in this. But overall, I like his profile. Very direct, very good dribbler, very explosive as an athlete, but extremely raw, right? I mean, he's 20 years old. He came from the Bundesliga, had a good first half of the season last year. Then the managerial change. The new manager didn't really play with wide players, so his stats went down, and maybe the perception of him went down a little unjustly and things like that. But we've seen flashes of it in the preseason of his 1v1 ability, but we've also seen flashes of him being a little bit getting pushed off the ball and just physically not strong enough at times. Decision making not always there, but you expect that with a 20-year-old. That's what's going to happen with a 20-year-old winger who's in a new system, in a new league, comes back to his home country, comes back with that price tag, knows that the eyes are on him. I'm perfectly fine with Gittins, and I want to see more of Gittins. I want to see how he plays out. I want to see him get his confidence up a little bit, and I want to see the fan base in general take a chill pill on him, right? Go old school 80s chill pill and just say, yo, let's give him time. Let's not put the pressure on him. He hasn't even played a full 90 minutes in total in his Chelsea career yet. So look, we've got time with him. We've got time with him. The next one, Alejandro Garnacho. Look, this is a case of almost uniformity in terms of the Chelsea fan base. I'd probably say 90% against signing him, 10% for signing him. The 10%, look, hands up, I can see the appeal, right? A lot of experience at a young age, has flashed ability here and there, right? Is dangerous in certain situations, counterattacks, running in, last man, getting behind, playing off the shoulder, and things like that. Is very confident player, backs himself. I see those as a positive aspect of it. But what I don't get, and what frustrates me about this transfer and about this player, is not only the off the field stuff, which I'm not as worried about with Chelsea because we handled Sancho very well. We didn't hear any peep from him, and for all intents and purposes, the vibes in the locker room are very, very good. And despite us having a lot of players and not too much rotation last year at times, there weren't any signs of disruption or lack of unity, even with after the whole BS with the BS that Enzo, that I called out at the time, and I still call out now, the racist stuff against the French players like Fofana and the various other French players in the national squad, and another kind of ties into other nationalities too. But they seem to put that past them. And look, that's up to them. That's up to the players in the locker room. I can't speak for Fofana. I can't speak for the other French players or other players of African descent that might have taken offense to that. That's up for them in their relationship with Enzo. Look, I wash my hands of it. That's not for me to say how somebody else should feel. But getting back to Garnacho, you've got a player he's got goals and assists, but he's also played a lot of minutes in a side that really depended on him. So look, he's also, in that aspect of it, you can say it's a pro and a con, but he's used to the pressure, right? He played at United. He's heard the early shouts of Ronaldo. He's got the Ronaldo CR7 underwear and all that BS. So he's not a player that's a stranger to pressure, a stranger to attention and things like that, whether it's good attention or bad attention. He's been under the spotlight before, and to be honest with you, he's handled it pretty poorly at times. So hopefully the maturity, being in a better situation, being in a more stable club will help him. But from a football aspect of it, I just have major concerns about his game. I have major concerns about his end product. I have major concerns about his decision making. I have major concerns about his ability to beat a man 1v1. I have major concerns with how he fits in terms of when we need to when we look at the one game that we really struggled this year versus Palace and how we needed to break them down and we couldn't break them down. I don't see a player like Garnacho contributing to that against a compact side, sitting in a low block or sitting in a mid block where you don't have the space. I think Garnacho in cup matches, I think even Garnacho in certain Champions League matches will fare better than he will in the league. But what upsets me is the fact that once we were told that we needed to make sales and we were told that we needed to get out nkunku first before we could bring in the likes of a Xavi Simons. And what did we do? We got nkunku out, got a good deal for him. He landed in a good place. Happy for nkunku. But then we prioritized Garnacho over Simons, who is a better player. Technically not a out-and-out left winger, but he would have given us cover at the 10 position. He would have been could give you a different sort of player off the left, right? You look at him in the mold of an Eze, right? And I'm not saying that he's of Eze's level. Eze has proven it in the Premier League, especially over the last couple of years. But he's a player that you can still play him out left. He'll probably come inside a little bit more, so that maybe you have the left back overlap and things like that. He can be Palmer's backup in a 10, and which we've needed because there were times last year where I thought Palmer needed to be subbed off where he was poor, and we needed a quality player to bring in there. So he's a player that I've just, for us to prioritize him and for him to be our last true out and out signing. I know we got Buenanote, but he's not technically our player. But for him to be prioritized over a Simmons or over a Fermin Lopez, to me, is just poor scouting. It's poor squad planning. It's just a poor decision in my mind, especially in hindsight now. And I know hindsight's 2020. Now that Tyreek George has come back, Tyreek George can also play over there on the left-hand side. I would have rather seen us stay with George and not sign Garnacho. But, like I said, Garnacho is a player that obviously the directors or somebody over there rates really highly because he's showing up on someone's sheet when it comes to metrics and data and things like that. So, don't have high expectations for him, but he's here now. We'll back him and so forth. Hato, I like Hato. Didn't know too much about him. Seen him a couple times. No issues with Hato. Love that he's a little bit in the mold of Cucurella in terms of being a physical left back. He's not really an overlapping left back. So we'll have to see him get better in that aspect if we want to utilize him in that regard. I don't really see him playing as center back too much. Maybe in the cup matches here and there. But he's a highly experienced player. Came to us with a lot of appearances for Ajax at a young age. Maybe even captain in the side a couple times. Just breaking into the Dutch squad. Good year. He could potentially, raise his level and get into the World Cup squad. But no complaints about Hato. Also, no complaints about the lap, other than the fact that he just got injured, which sort of set off this domino ricochet effect of just complete fuckery that we'll get into. But happy that Delap's here. Love his profile, love his fight, love his physicality and things like that. Esteval, don't really need to talk too much about Esteval. He's looked every bit and been every bit as good as advertised. I thought he's been unlucky to get a goal. Thought he's had a couple of opportunities to get one that he'll probably, we'll probably start seeing him putting it away. But can play a little bit in the 10, can play out wide, dynamic. Was just skinning Bassi. Bassi had a nice IG post about him. But yeah, looks like a future stud for us, a future star. Very happy with him. Also very happy with the Sugo, even though we haven't seen him formally this year. But what we saw in the Club World Cup looks to be a very tidy player. With the fixtures coming up pretty quickly now that the Champions League matches have been announced, now that we entered the third round of the Carabao Cup versus, I think, Lincoln, I expect to see him in even some games where we're up and it's time to just set up shop again and get Caicedo some rest. Happy about him. Mamadou Sarr went out on loan to Strasbourg. Don't know too much about him, but from everything that we've seen and so far at Strasbourg, I've heard good results for him, and that potentially he's somebody that is partly to blame in a positive aspect of as to why we didn't go out in the market. So again, super young, one for the future, one that can maybe contribute next year or the year after. But so far, we all like what we see. Looks like he's pretty comfortable on the ball. Looks like he's a good athlete. Same thing with Kendry Paez, one for the future. If you're talking about potentially reasons why we didn't get a Lopez, why we didn't get a Xavi Simons, and why we brought in a Buenanote on loan, potentially to not block this kid's pathway. But again, he comes to us next year, depending on how he fares at Strasbourg. That's a 19-year-old kid backing up our best player on the team. Do you want somebody a little bit better to sort of raise the levels in there? Or do you really think that Paez is that player that was sort of advertised when we first were linked to him and he sort of broke onto the scene with the Ecuador national team and things like that? I like him, but like I said, I don't want to be counting on 18, 19-year-olds next year to play a considerable role in our team, apart from bit part minutes here and there. So we'll see about Pais. The Buonanotte loan, I don't get it. I don't get it from the Brighton aspect. I don't get it from our aspect. It's a dry loan, so there's no obligation to buy. We do get like the right the right to match any offer that comes in. I haven't seen too much of him. I mean, the guy spent his loan last year out on loan at Leicester. I think he did score versus us. A couple caps for Argentina. But I mean, why are we developing a player for Brighton that there's no guaranteed future at Chelsea Football Club? And again, it could be to not block a potential pathway, to not get bloated at a position, but get a better player in, get a better loan in for if it's a 1-year rental. Again, why are we developing players for Brighton? Brighton should be no disrespect to Brighton. They're a fantastic football club, fantastic model. They've really flipped or changed the mentality, I think, of the transfer market, which says a lot considering the size of their club. But why are we developing a player for them that's not going to be a part of our team and guaranteed moving forward? I don't get it. I also don't want to see him play major minutes for us, partly for that fact, but also partly for the fact that I just don't think that he's good enough for this particular level. And I'm not sure why Brighton let him or loaned him out to us, because he's not going to get a ton of minutes at that position, right? Because we've got Palmer there, we've got Esteval there, we've been playing João Pedro in the 10 a lot since Palmer's been injured. So again, a move that just I don't get. Disasi, we failed to get him a move, failed whether that was permanent or even a loan. Yes, the Turkish window is still open. Maybe he goes somewhere in January like he did last year. But we had all summer to get him out. He was part of the bomb squad anyways. Why we didn't find a solution for him, I don't get it, especially considering that there was interest for him. I'm not going to crash it on the directors and the board too much for outgoings. I thought in general, our outgoings were very well. But, you know, there are a couple of players that sort of fell underneath the radar. So, you know, if you're looking back at this and the rest of these folks are just, you know, this transfer market, how it does, they just returned on loan. And we'll talk about these because a lot of these guys went out on permanent deals anyways. But if you're looking at it from the standpoint of what our key additions are, it's these folks right here. And if you're looking at it from an objective standpoint, this guy, Pedro, raises the levels. This guy, Esteval, raises the levels. This guy, Delap, when he's healthy, could potentially raise the levels. But look, there's still a huge concern about our left wing. This is in euros, but that's about 90 million pounds. And we still don't have a definitive first choice at left winger. We still don't feel comfortable with either of these two. There's still two project players. You could have spent that money better, in my opinion. You could have went out and got a Leao and then potentially you get a Gittins or even a Garnacho to sort of be that development player behind them. You could have went out there and got a more of a game changer, in my opinion, at that left wing spot. Like Hato, thought he feels a need. I like Asugo. Even though we're kind of stacked in the midfield, he is the most like for like with Caicedo. So I'm happy with that. And we've got some other players coming next year. We've got the Quenda coming to go along with Pais and some of these other folks back from loan. So I'm okay from that standpoint. But I thought compared to some of the other big clubs who, in my opinion, are already ahead of us in terms of where they are at in their project and their current squad, I don't think we did enough to close the gap between us and Arsenal, us and Liverpool. I do think we've moved ahead of Man City, considering their frailties and considering that they've had 3-4 bad windows in a row. But from an incoming standpoint, we needed a keeper, in my opinion. We needed a center back, in my opinion. We are one injury away at the center back position from some uncomfortable conversations. And I like young Josh. I don't count on Fofana, but these are players that I do not want. I do not want to count on when it comes to the meat of the season and so forth. Right? We go to Bayern Munich in a couple weeks' time. We've got Barcelona at home. We go to Naples for Napoli. We've got some tough games, and if you're telling me we're going into that with a partnership of Chalobah and Trev and Tosin. I'm a little concerned about that, even though I rate Maresca and I rate the defenders and the center or Caicedo in front of them. I love our fullbacks. I'm a little concerned at that we're overly reliant upon those players as well as Maresca's system to sort of shield what I think is a spine that could be stronger building out from the back in terms of the keeper and the center back. So that's my thought on the incomings. The outgoings, again, I wouldn't say 10 out of 10 because we didn't get solutions for a few players, aka Sterling, aka DeSassi and things like that. But overall, the outgoings were just fantastic. I think we had the record sales when it comes to sales in one particular window. But I mean, just look at the figures. Madueke, I thought we improved upon Madueke with Esteval. And nkunku wasn't a really great fit for us. Happy with him that he went out and we recouped some of that initial fee. João Felix, super happy that we got rid of him. Extremely happy unhappy that we actually signed him in the first place. But because of his Q rating, he's always a player that's going to be somewhat easy to move. And especially considering he wasn't on crazy wages here. Petrovic, I would have liked to see him get a shot this year at the number one, but pretty decent fee for him, like 25 million for him. And he's going to a Bournemouth side that, we can see him week in and week out. Leslie, I like Leslie as a profile. He started, I thought, fairly well for Burnley, but he's just it's just a numbers game with Leslie. Like, I think we have better midfielders than Leslie. So I'm not too happy to see him, but I still think that he's going to be a pretty good player and have a pretty good career. Dewsbury Hall sort of turned it around. Has hit the ground running at Everton. Thought it was a pretty decent fee for him. Again, without the Conference League in there, I don't want to see Dewsbury Hall in the Champions League. So I was happy to see him get his move. And again, happy to see him do well because he's a player that even just though he only played limited minutes for us, he did play some crucial roles for us down the end. Even came on at that Nottingham Forest game at the end, as well as the Conference League game, and played fairly well and kind of kept it moving and things like that. So just a good good overall player. Vega, I thought that the market would be a little bit better for him, but he gets his move. He gets his center back move. He goes to Villarreal, who's in the Champions League. Yellow Submarine. Decent, pretty decent player. I actually liked him. Like I wouldn't have minded seeing him stay, but obviously we're seeing him stay as a left backup option or even that left-sided center back option. But for him, I think he just wanted to play, so I can't fault him there. I think he probably has an eye on getting into that Portuguese national team, and it's probably better for him at Villarreal than it is being a backup at Chelsea. So all good for that. Broja to Burnley. Look, we stole money there. I think that's the guy that we got 20 million for him plus add-ons, who's barely played over the last 2-3 years, and even when he has played, hasn't looked to be a shell of what we first saw when he went out on loan to Southampton. Happy for him. Hopefully he gets his career around, but yeah, great deal for us. Carney, in a similar mold, you could see the potential, you could see the talent, you could see the ability, but you just couldn't see the availability, and just wasn't there. I thought the initial fee was a little bit low. I like to see him go to Dortmund because that's a good club at developing players, and they do play in a lot of the major competitions. Initial fee was relatively low, but it's understandable considering his injury history. But the sell on for there, I think that's going to be a nice little fee for us coming towards the end of it. Nico, this was a crazy one, right? We all know what happened with Nico. He was pretty much told that he was going to be surplus to requirements. He asked to leave, although initially he wanted to fight for his place. And, there was a market for him, but this was a year that a little unfortunate for him because you can say what you want about the quality of the strikers that were out on the market, but you can't say you can't say that there was a lack of quantity of strikers. And ultimately, he got a pretty decent sized move. I thought there were some other clubs in the Premier League, Villa, Newcastle, that could have used his services. But with the situation that ended was just crazy with him, right? Him going out, flying out to Bayern, but then Delap getting hurt, and then us saying, no, you gotta come back to Chelsea, or unless Bayern comes with a permanent solution, which they ultimately did. But in the meantime, they gave us a ridiculous loan fee, 16.5 million. And then there's an obligation to buy if certain conditions are met. We'll see if those conditions are met. I'm not 100% sold that all of those conditions will be met, but I also haven't seen every last condition on there. I do think he'll smash it in the Bundesliga. You give a player like him who can link up and can run all that space and time in the Bundesliga. The finishing will probably always be a little bit subpar, but he's still a player that got 14 penalty goals, non-penalty goals for us one year, 10 for us last year, with it considering that he was awful and injured for pretty much the whole second half of the season. There's a player there. Unfortunately, some of the bonehead decisions and personnel actions on the pitch have really cost us, really potentially could have cost us last year, but we were able to overcome them because of the quality of the team and the quality of the manager. But yeah, we got both unlucky and lucky when it comes to Delap. We got unlucky in the sense that Delap got injured and is going to be out for a while, but we got lucky in the sense that if that would have happened, say that happened on international duty and he was with the under 21s or whatever, we would have been stuck. We would have been stuck with potentially with Tyreek George, but Tyreek George could have been easily out the window. So we would have had João Pedro as our only recognized out and out striker, with maybe Shims in the youth setup, but you don't want to have to rely on him. And if you're playing in a system where you pretty much play two strikers, which we have for the last two matches, we were leaving ourselves extremely, extremely thin, which ultimately resulted in Jackson going and then Guy getting recalled. So I think Guy spent like 26 days in Sunderland. Did get his goal in the Carabao Cup, but he's also Carabao Cup tied. I like Guy as a profile. I don't like the fact that we have to rely on a 19-year-old as our second choice striker, with a side that has aspirations to win trophies and so forth. So I'm hugely concerned about that. I hope I'm proven wrong. We didn't see enough of Guy last year because of the injuries that he picked up during the second half of the season. And we pretty much only saw him in the Conference League. Looks to be a good player, looks to be a striker, and not so much a traditional, what you think like of a Spanish player or a player that comes up through La Masia who's super technical. He's a little bit more physical. He does press like prime Barcelona would expect. He does sort of have a presence inside the box. He's good with both feet, in terms of getting shots off and things like that. He's not great in terms of creating shots for himself, but there is a player there that that can be developed, and I'm excited to see him, but I'm also cautiously not pessimistic, but I'm a little nervous that we're going to have to rely on a 19-year-old at least for a couple of months until Delap gets back. Amugu, Strasbourg, didn't even understand why we bought that brother, but he's off, pretty decent fee there. Played a couple of times for us last year. Wasn't terrible, but wasn't anything special. Humphreys, sold him early in the window. I think he's been injured for Burnley, so we haven't seen him. But again, that's pure profit. 14 million, was never going to play for us. Happy for that. Same thing with Kepa. Happy that he's off the books finally. We bumped him up and with his extension, I think the last 2 years, and he proved last year that he's capable of starting week in, week out in the Premier League for Bournemouth, for a pretty decent Bournemouth side. Going to a pretty good side in Arsenal, even though he's their number 2. It is what it is. Don't want him here. I don't think he's better than any of the keepers that we have, and I don't even rate the keepers that we have. So Bettinelli, Gilchrist, it is what it is. Those guys were always going to move. Gilchrist not of the level, even though he's had a couple special moments for us. Tottenham, Chilwell, free transfer to Strasbourg. Look, it is what it is. This is what you get with multi-club models. You get some fuckery every once in a while. It was a free transfer, so basically we just got his contracts off the books. Chilwell probably just wants to play. He was like, you know what, fuck it, I'll go to France and see what they're about. Played second half of the season last year on loan at Palace. Is what it is. And then the rest we sort of already talked about, with the exception of Sancho didn't come back, and then Ancelino, who looks like he's hit the ground running at Dortmund. But again, it's just one game. I've seen a lot of folks already saying, why didn't we keep Ancelino around? And I'm like, look, it's one game in the Bundesliga. I'd like to see him get a year's worth of experience in the Bundesliga before we actually decide what we were going to do with him. But he's still a player that's could potentially feature in some of our plans moving forward. So we'll see. But overall, if I had to get the window a rating, and let me know in the comments what you think your rating is as well. Overall, I would say the outgoings 9 out of 10. Always going to be extremely hard to move the amount of players that we moved, but like I mentioned before, the largest recoup ever for in terms of sales and things like that, which we needed to do. If you read into the UEFA and the FFP type stuff, PSR and all that other BS, because we're now all financial accountants, and we used to just be fans and just watch the game and have opinions on managers and players. Now we have expertise on balancing the books and all that other bullshit. But outgoings a 9 out of 10. Incomings, I'm going to say 5 out of 10. And obviously, this could change. We'll revisit this 6 months and a year down the line and look back and see, did we make any mistakes? Did some of the fees, are they a little bit exorbitant? Did we let any folks go that we probably shouldn't have let go and things like that? But yeah, I don't think we did enough to kick on after the Club World Cup and after what we saw in preseason and after what we saw to end last year. I thought we left it a little bit short, and considering what our rivals or the folks that we want to catch, the Arsenals, the Liverpools, did in the market, we already had an uphill battle to catch those two teams from a quality standpoint. And I don't think that we did enough, which sort of shows the disconnect between the fans' expectations and the ownership group's expectations. Ownership groups, this is a window that is a top 4 window, maybe even outside of a top 4 window. When we wanted a Champions League, a title contention type of window, and obviously, like I mentioned before, the disconnect is just it's there. We're going to have to temper our expectations a little bit to match the expectations of the board. But we'll see. I particularly feel that they left Enzo or Maresca a little bit short. I thought that they didn't back him fully. And you could say, yeah, we spent a lot of money. We always spend money. But the thing, when we spend money, it's not always for the first team. And that's part of our gripe as Chelsea fans, is we want us to spend money to improve the first 11 or the first 16, 17, 18, or I'll just say the first team squad. And if you look at our squad from last year, are we better? With losing with the left wing situation still up in the air, losing our best center back from last year, having the same keeper, I would say we're probably a little bit better, because I do, especially with a healthy Reece James, Cucurella back up, Esteval coming in, Pedro hitting the ground running. I think we've improved, but I don't think we've improved enough. So, look, been a little bit of a long one today, Pauls, but let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought of the window. Let me know who you think is going to surprise you. Let me know who you think is going to have to really earn your trust and to sway your opinion about that player. Just let me know. Let me know what your transfer grade is. But as always, appreciate everybody. Hit me in the comments. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe, turn those notifications on, and we'll see you at the next one. We'll probably international window. We'll probably do maybe a couple of bit of fun ones, right? We'll get some stuff pre-recorded. We'll do maybe look at some kits for this year. Who's got the best kits in the league now that all the third kits are out? We'll look at the rivals. We'll do a week 3 roundup of what happened in this particular this last match week. Just try to bring you more content, hop on more panels and things like that, get the name out there a little bit more, get a little bit more exposure, have a little bit more fun, and so forth. But let me know, folks. Have a good one. Peace.